friends. In today's video, I'm demonstrating another Christmas card design, which is part of my 7-day Christmas card series. If you missed day 1, because today is day 2, day 1's link will be in the description below. The Christmas card design that I'm going to share with you today uses Stampin' Up's masking paper and heat embossing. This is a really fun way to create some beautiful designs for your Christmas cards. We're also using dies, but you can use punches as well. I will have some samples and some variations of this technique to share with you also. So without further ado, let's start stamping. The first card I'm going to demonstrate is using the dies that coordinate with our Christmas season stamp set. Now in our current Stampin' Up catalog, you can find these dies on page 174. They're called seasonal labels, and we are going to use the leaves, the greenery, and we are going to pull in the masking paper. So this is the masking paper from Stampin' Up. You get 12 sheets, they're 5 by 7, and a little bit goes a long way. I've been making quite a few cards and I still have a lot of sheets left. So this is really an addictive technique. I've really been enjoying it. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay my masking paper on my die cutting machine, and I'm going to bring in some dies. Okay, so I'm going to just put the holly on here and just some of the different leaves. These are more of the open bold shaped images, but I think they're going to look really good for this technique. And try not to waste this paper. Now I actually have not used these dies on a card yet. I thought I would wait and film the process. So let's get my sheet, my cover, my plate, and run that through. And I forgot to show you something about this masking paper, so I'm going to quickly show you that before I pull the dies off the machine. If you've not used this before, it's serrated on the back because that's where you're going to peel, and that's the tacky part. So that's going to peel off our cardstock. It's not permanent. So I am putting my dies on the front so that this is behind them. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. So we have our holly leaves. Okay. Some fun greenery shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling these off. So what I have here is a piece of basic white. This measures 4 by 5 1/4. And you're really going to need the take your pick tool for this, because if your die cuts are cut so that they're not on that serrated line, you're going to have to take your pick tool and get it in between. And this is really tricky with the camera right beneath my face here, but you want to peel that off. And of course, because I'm on camera, it's going to take longer. There we go. You can see that it's peeling off there. Okay, so you're just going to peel off that backing, and you can tell I've been stamping. I've got ink all over my fingers. And I'm just going to position this right onto my basic white cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the other pieces. Now if you wanted to, you could add more die cuts to fill in the blank areas, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at that for now. Now the next thing you're going to need is the Versamark ink pad, and you want to make sure your Versamark is well inked. So if you have your Versamark ink refill, if this is a bit dry, you're definitely going to want to put some refill on there. You want to make sure you've got lots of, you want to make sure that's really wet. So all I'm going to do now is cover the entire piece. Now ordinarily I probably would have taken the time to add some more greenery to fill in some of those bigger blank areas, but there's a few things I want to share with you today with this technique, and I'm not going to have time to go a little bit too crazy, because I have so many different ideas now that I've been making cards with this technique that I just had to get filming. Otherwise, I would be too busy stamping and not filming. But I will share some of my ideas as we go along, and I think you're going to be really having fun with this technique for your Christmas cards. Okay, so now it's time to pull in embossing powder. I'm going to pull in my silver and my gold. So you could do all gold, all silver. I'm going to do a little bit of both. And I do want to mention, in the light I can see for the most part, I think I've got my first mark fully covered on this. When you're doing this at home, guys, just kind of turn your paper a little bit and you can see if it doesn't have ink on it. So you really want to make sure that's inked up well. I'm not removing those masks yet. And I'm just going to sprinkle on a little bit of silver powder here and there, because I am going to do some gold on this as well. And maybe a little bit here. Okay. So that embossing powder is sticking to all of the first mark that is surrounding those die cuts with the masking paper. And because I have silver on here already, my gold is going to go in between that silver, so there's not silver going into my container, because the silver is sticking to my cardstock really, really well. And this is just a fun way to get a variation with your embossing powders. But again, if you want to do all silver or all gold, that will look beautiful. All right, now it's time to set that with the heat tool. So there it is. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel off these masked bits, and then you have that white behind it with the beautiful embossing surrounding your die cuts. I am also going to save these pieces, and I'm going to use them on my next card. I'm just peeling it up, and these ones are easy to peel. If you're using die cuts that are more intricate, like snowflakes or something, you're going to have to really take your time taking these off. Look at that beautiful background for your cards. Now you can use this whole thing, or you can trim it up and put it on your card base. I'm just going to use the whole thing for my card. So I have a shaded spruce card base. This measures 8.5 by 5.5, and I've scored it at 4 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere this just directly right on front like that. Look how pretty that is. Next, I'm just pulling out a scrap strip of basic white, and that's going to be for my sentiment. For my sentiment, I'm pulling in a stamp set I shared on yesterday's card demonstration, Framed and Festive, and I'm going to stamp this Merry Christmas. And because my card base is shaded spruce, that's the color that I think I'm going to stick with here. So I'm just going to stamp that down, and then I'll trim that out into a little banner, a little bit crooked, so I'm going to flip that over, do it again. That's better. I'm just going to trim that out. Okay, and I'm going to flag the end, so I'm just going to go up the center and then from the edge to the center on both sides. I love doing banners like this. Now, if you want, you can put this on a little bit of green, and I think I'm going to, because I want to pop that up a little bit. So I'm bringing in a piece of shaded spruce here. I'm just going to glue this right on. Now I have a sheet of Stampin' Dimensionals. You can see I've used up all the center bits, but I use the bits on the end as well. So that's what I'm going to do here. Just going to cut a little bit of that. And I'm going to put that right here on the center. Okay, I'm going to add a ribbon bow right here, and for that I'm going to use my vanilla gold ribbon. I'm going to make a bow. So I'm just looping it almost like two little bunny ears, and then just put it in through the loop. Don't want it too big. I'm going to put that right here like so. And I'm going to hold that in place with a glue dot. So I'm going to stamp the inside, but I want to emboss it. So I'm going to use this stamp, May This Season Be Filled with Peace and Joy. So because I'm embossing, I do need to take my embossing buddy so that I don't get ink where I don't want it. And I realize I have some red splatters on this paper from a previous project, but we're just going to leave that there. So ink it up with my Versamark. And I'm also going to emboss silver and gold onto this image. And there's my card. Simple, but pretty. And that embossing and those images are so pretty. Now, you're probably thinking that's, you know, pretty simple, but you can do a lot with that. You can pick up color and drop your color into the center. So I could do that actually just to show you. So I'm going to bring in my shaded spruce and bring in a block. I'm just going to pick up some of that ink. Okay, so I'm bringing in my water painter. This is the tip that I'm going to be using, because when you get them, they come with different brush ends. This is the one I showed on yesterday's card, but I'm going to use this one today. So I'm just squeezing it to make sure I've got water coming out. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of water right inside the leaf. Now I could have done this before I glued this onto my panel, but it's a little bit of an afterthought, to be quite honest. So I'm making sure I have a lot of water on there. I'm going to pick this up and just kind of pounce it in. And it won't go past those embossed lines. And I'll do the same thing with this one. And if you want to, you can pull in some different greens. So let's pull in a little bit of Old Olive. Pulling in some garden green for this middle one. So if this is something you want to do to add the ink, do it before you put your ribbon on. Oh geez. All right. And I'm going to do the same color for this one right here. Oh, forgot to put my water on. See, this is why it gets really intense if you don't have it watered down enough. It'll be a lot darker ink. Kind of like what just happened there. Some more shaded spruce on those hollies. So I'm going to get some more ink going. because I want it to kind of pull out the color of the card base. And now we have the berries. So I'm going to bring in cherry cobbler for my berries. I'll put in a splash of color. So this is one of my old style ink pads, so I've got the ink on the lid, so I'm just going to pick that up and just fill that in. To finish this card, I'm pulling in some of my white pearls. I'm going to pick up the tiny ones and just position them onto those berries, and that's actually going to pull this white in also. There is that card done. Super fun, different way to use the dies. And again, you could keep it where you have the white, or you can add the color. Okay. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the pieces that I took off. So I have a piece of Pear Pizzazz cardstock cut down at 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm going to bring in my silicone craft mat. Get this stuff out of the way. And again, this is the masking paper that we have embossed on top of. So this is not permanent. It's not, if you put it on your card, it's not going to stay on your card. You need to add adhesive behind that. So I'm going to add some glue. So to do that, I'm going to squeeze some glue out onto my silicone craft mat. And then you're going to take a piece of sponge, or this is how I'm going to be doing it anyways. And I'm going to take my die cut, pick up some of that glue, and just tap it on the back of this. Okay, and then I'm just going to position that right onto my card. And I'm going to do that with the remaining pieces. You want to make sure that you don't put your die cuts on top of where you've put your glue, because then you're going to get marks on your embossed piece. So when you put that on your mat, just make sure it's in a clean spot. And then these mats, you can just wash underneath your tap to clean them. I could leave this as it is and add my stamped sentiment, but I'm going to show you another fun way you can do something with this piece, and that is to run it through an embossing folder. So I've grabbed my time-worn type, and I'm going to just position this inside, and I'm going to run that through my machine. So this is a 3D embossing folder, so I've got my gray plate that goes on top of that. And that looks so cool. And since I have the tear tape out, I'm just going to use that to put this onto my card base. You could use whatever adhesive you like. And I'm going to put this on a real red card base. I got my ribbon bow. I'm going to put that here. So I'm using the little square from the Stylish Shapes die collection, and I'm just going to cut that from some basic white. And that is going to be for the sentiment. And And I'm using Real Red to stamp my sentiment, and the sentiment is from Vintage Christmas Stamp Set. I'm using this nice little one, A Very Merry Christmas to You. I'm just going to stamp that right inside. Love that. And I'm just going to pop that on just like that with the Stampin' Dimensional. And because I want to pull in some red to this card, I'm just going to put some red gems inside these holly berries. And it'll add some extra sparkle also. And for the inside, I'm using the Framed and Festive, and I'm stamping From Our Home to Yours. So I'm pulling in my Pear Pizzazz ink pad, inking that up, and my Real Red marker, and I'm just going to color in From Our Home, or From Our and To, just to pull some red in there. So there are those two cards done, and you can see how fun and easy it is to use those masked pieces from our masking paper to create a whole beautiful second card, and then that gorgeous embossing. So I have some other holly dies already cut, and I'm going to speed up the filming because I want to show you what they're going to look like embossed, because these have more detail inside versus the openness of those designs. And then I'm going to show you some cards I've already made, and also some cards using our punches instead of dies. And I think you're going to have a lot of ideas for your Christmas cards. Time to peel off the pieces, and just like the last card, I'm going to save these for another card. And look how you have that embossing coming through. Isn't that pretty? I love it. So pretty, right? So I already did something similar to this earlier, so I'm going to show you the card that I made. And because I had masked this area, I was able to stamp on top. And all I did is I used my Real Red Stampin' Blend on the gems, added my ribbon, stamped the inside, and I definitely did not want to add color to that because I really liked the white. So you can see what you can do with that. And then the pieces that I removed off of that, I turned into this card. So pretty. So you can see you get an entirely different look depending on how you want to use your dies and your masking paper. So many different ways that you can play with this, and it's a great way to utilize your dies differently than maybe what you've considered. Now, I had mentioned you could use this technique using a punch. So this is the punch that I used, and I did the same thing on this card, but I just used gold powder. I didn't add any other silver, and I also decided to step it up a little bit. I added some pearlized paint on 3 of the stars, and then I used our clear wing Castella inside the other ones, added my gems, and that is how that card turned out. Nothing on the inside yet. Simple but pretty, lots of fun texture. Now, if you don't want to emboss, you can still use the masking paper and your punches and dies, but instead you can just sponge using one of our blending brushes. And this is what I got. Very simple, one layer card. Actually, it's not one layer. I did glue it onto a Night of Navy card base, and I used Pacific Point. No, beg your pardon. I used Tahitian Tide, I used Starry Sky, and Night of Navy. And then inside the stars, again, not sure if the lighting and camera is picking this up, but I used my clear wing Castella and I just went from point to point. So I didn't fill in the stars completely, but it definitely has the glitter and a little twine bow. And that was it. And of course, I added some gems just to, well, because gems make me happy. And they just add that extra element to your cards and that extra shine and sparkle. Very, very simple. And these stars were, I sponged this first. So I put my stars that I punched out with the punch and the masking paper, I put them on this. I sponged it first. When I peeled them off, I put them on another piece of basic white, and then I did my embossing. So these were used a second time. The masks were used a second time. I'll be back tomorrow for day 3 of my 7-day Christmas card series, and tomorrow's card designs are going to be all about mass producing, and I'm going to share some of my favorite designs for creating a lot of cards when I need a lot of cards and maybe time is not of the essence. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. Until then, take care and happy stamping.